G'day people, I'm Sharon, welcome to my channel. Big thanks to Steve who has allowed me to use his Janome 1008 to video just how these machines work. This is the top of a Janome 1008. It's a very basic machine. Let's have a look at the bits here. This is the flywheel. You turn that generally towards you so the top comes towards you. This is the take-up lever. It's very important whenever you're doing most things on the machine that this is in the top position. It means it's finished a stitch completely. This here is the tension disc for doing bobbin winding. When the thread goes in there, it needs to be firmly in there. This is the bobbin winding part of the machine. When it's over to the right, the bobbin winder will work. When it's over to the left, it's disconnected. We have two spool pins that come up here. They just push down gently into the machine. Over time there is a rubberized piece underneath that will disintegrate. We're talking probably 20 years for it to disintegrate. It can be replaced, but if you're gentle with it, you should be able to keep these functioning for years. You have two of them so that you can do work with a twin needle on this machine. I'm going to wind a bobbin now, and I'm going to do it by placing thread on this spool pin. It goes into the tension thing firmly. It's not wobbling around in there, it's firmly in. If I take this piece of thread, fold it and give it a twist, I will make the thread more firm, which means that I can then put it through the bobbin from the inside to the outside more easily. Put that on top of the bobbin winder and move it across. If you've got your machine turned on, that should just wind then. If I pull this out, that disconnects the main body of the machine. Keep winding until you've got at least enough on there so that the thread is not going to come undone. And the next bit is to cut it off close to the top of the bobbin. You then continue with the foot control until you've got as much onto that bobbin as you need. When you've finished, cut it off here, over to the left and lift it up. A well wound bobbin will be firm like that. It doesn't have pieces that are flicking in and out and loopy and stuff like that. If you've got a well wound bobbin, you can carry on. If it's loopy and soft, then put that bobbin back on the spool pin and wind it onto another bobbin. You don't need to throw it out, just wind it onto another bobbin. When you go to thread the top of the machine, it doesn't really matter which one of these you put the thread onto. We're going to follow a couple of arrows that go across the handle, one here to this. There is a number 1 next to that. I'm going to go down to number 2. And remember I said before we need this piece to be in the up position, so I'm going to hand wind this to make sure it's in the up position. And I'm going to go around that and forward and make sure it's firmly into that take-up lever. Then we go back down again and we'll meet again at the front of the machine. To finish threading the top of the machine, I've come down from 1 to 2, up around 3. Back here is number 4. There is a guide just under that 4. And then there are 2 guides, one on each side of the needle. Your needle needs to go in flat to back, so if I unscrew that and take it out, you may or may not be able to see that is actually flat at the back. There is a groove down the front of the needle. The needle in here up as high as it will go and tighten there. If you can't get it tight enough, put a screwdriver in there and make sure it's tight. You don't want that needle to come out while you're sewing. You then thread the thread from the front to the back through the eye of the needle, like that. There, I do have another video about how to use a separate needle threader, which will work fine on this. I'm then going to put the thread under the foot and to the back. To put my bobbin in, I need to take this piece off, which is just taking it to the left. Open up here. The person who owns this machine has put some little numbers in here as an aide de memoire. If these pieces are out, check out my video that's got a very friendly thing on it that says don't panic, because I show you how to put these pieces into a machine. To put your bobbin into this machine, it needs to go into this bobbin case. You put it in like it's a letter Q. So the piece is coming off to the right and hanging down. I put it in there, and then there's a little groove on the right hand side, up through the groove, and then hopefully you heard that, it clicks in, and now there's some tension on that. As I pull it, the thread is going to turn clockwise in here as it comes out. If I turn this upside down at the moment, the bobbin is just going to fall out. What I need to do is grab hold of this little arm and hold it out, and that will stop the bobbin from falling out of the bobbin holder. I put it in here. There's a little area at the top where this arm is going to go. So what I'm aiming to do is to put the hole over that in there and put the little arm into the little place for it. When it's in there, it does shift around a little tiny bit, but it doesn't move much, and it doesn't come out. Once you've got it in there and you've let go of this, it's not coming out. If I've got it in there correctly, the needle, as it goes down, will pick up the bobbin thread and pull it up to the top for me. And the machine is now threaded. Close that, put the arm back on, and the reason I generally sew with these on is that it supports the fabric. So if you haven't got anything here, your fabric is trying to pull forward against what the feed dogs are trying to do. So here we are at the front of the machine. When I'm set to stitch A, I'm going to get a straight stitch that is in the middle of the hole here. If I go to stitch B, I'm going to get a straight stitch, but now it's at the left end of that hole. These marks here indicate that as we go from B to C, the stitch becomes a zigzag, and it will get wider and wider the more I get it over here, until when I get to C, it's as wide a zigzag as this machine can do. There. D is a 3-step zigzag, and E and F are for doing blind hems. An E is a blind hem for a stretch fabric, and an F is a blind hem for a woven fabric. I rarely ever do stitch F. I use E for woven and stretch fabrics. G is a picket edge. H and I are decorative stitches. For them to work, you have to have the length in this bit here that is indicated by a picture of a buttonhole. So it needs to be a short stitch length, but how long you make it is up to you. Doing a buttonhole, I have to go back the other way past the A. Stitch 1 is going to do a narrow zigzag down the left side. Stitch 2 will be a wide zigzag that does the front. Stitch 3 will go backwards with a narrow zigzag up the right hand side, and stitch 4 will give me the back bar tack. So as I'm doing a buttonhole, I need to change from stitch 1 to 2 to 3 and then back to 4
and all the time the zigzag length or the stitch length needs to be in that area. It will be up to you to determine where in that area you want it, but that's where it needs to be.
When you go to start sewing with your machine, if you can hear the motor going but the needle's not going up and down, it probably means you've still got the flywheel declutched on the right and you need to push it back in.
I've set the machine to A, which has the stitching in straight stitch in the middle of the hole here. When I'm on stitch A, that's when all of these markings come into view and they work. So if I was doing something that required me to have a 15mm seam allowance, I would put the cut edge of the fabric on that line there. I usually sew with my stitch length somewhere between 2 and 3, closer to 3 than 2. But if I sew right now, this is going to happen. So you can hear the motor is running, but nothing's happening. It's because I had the flywheel on the right-hand end out while I was winding that bobbin. So if the machine doesn't move, push the flywheel in, and now let's have a look. So there's my straight stitch. How long it is determined by this, but remembering this is my reverse, so as I'm sewing along, that is how I make it do reverse. When you go to take your fabric out, make sure this take up lever goes all the way up to the top. The needle actually starts coming down a little bit. The reason I want to do that is to make sure I've completely finished a stitch. So lift the foot, take the fabric out to the back. Don't try and take it to the front. If you're taking it to the front, you're putting stress on the needle. Take it to the back. One of the weird things about these machines, they've got a little gouge, chasm, I don't know quite what to call it, in the back of the shaft here. When you put your thread in that, and you've got a finger on either side of it and pull down, that's where your thread cutter is. So you don't need to actually have scissors at the machine to cut your thread. You can use that cutter. A lot of people don't know it's there. So there is my stitching, straight stitching, and I've got some bits of reverse in there. If I turn the machine now onto B, the needle will move. So it's going to be in a different position, which means that these things no longer mean anything. If I put it in the same place I was at before, it will in fact be further over to the left. Those numbers no longer mean anything when I'm on B. I'm going to show you, I'll put the stitch length down to 1, and I'm going to show you what happens as I gradually move this from B to C. Once again, I'm making sure that my needle is in the up position and the flywheel is at the top. Lift the foot, take it to the back, and there are the different stitch widths I get from moving from B to C. It's not a completely smooth transition. There are little bumps in the way, so I think it's probably doing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5mm stitch width. I don't actually have the correct feet for this machine, only the basic foot, because I'm borrowing a machine from somebody. To take a foot off, bring the little bar at the back towards you. Don't push it away, you'll break it if you do that. I'm going to use here a satin stitch foot, and it's probably not exactly from this machine, but I have checked it out and it will work. Drop the ankle onto the foot. Now if I want to do one of these decorative stitches over here, I'm going to set my stitch length somewhere in that area that shows for a buttonhole. It's a fairly short stitch length. I'm going to go over here to H and we'll have a look. Once again, I'm taking the take-up lever to the top, pulling to the back, and I can cut off on the back. I am going to show you now what you do for a buttonhole with these machines if you do not have the correct buttonhole foot, or if you're trying to do a buttonhole that is bigger than the buttonhole foot allows. So I have drawn on a big buttonhole. That's how long I want it to be. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to part 1, which I know I need to go backwards around here till I get to number 1. And I need to have the needle come down in that line I drew at the back. And I'm going to keep the center of this foot on that line. I'm going to stop when I get to the line I drew at this end. Then I'm going to move on to section 2 and do a few stitches. And then I'm going on to the 3. And then onto the 4. Now I could have made that buttonhole any length I want to. It's not stopped by using a buttonhole foot. You'll notice that it has ended up a little bit to the left of the line I drew. It's not going to be exact, but it's actually a pretty good buttonhole. If I made those stitches much shorter, I'd probably get caught. So they would build up too much thread there and it wouldn't work very well. But how that is, I can make as long a buttonhole as I like. These 2 threads really need to be pulled through to the back. And there's one of them pulled through. The first one I probably have now stitched into place so much that it won't pull through. But you pull them through, oh there they are, they're both there, and then just tie them off on the back. And that's how you can do a buttonhole.
The older style machines that don't have lock stitches on them, the way to finish off ends on things like buttonholes is to take the top thread through to the back and tie it off. It's sometimes difficult to get hold of the first thread where you started because it's been sewn into stuff and doesn't want to pull through. If you can get hold of both of them, pull them both through to the back and tie them off. And I've not yet got the blind hem foot on, but I'm going to show you my preparation. I've deliberately chosen a fabric that has a very definite wrong side and right side. I have folded up an edge and folded it up again. That is going to be my hem. When I start doing blind hems on sewing machines, I always do an extra row of stitching that makes my life so much easier. I'm including video here from my FD206 video, how to do a blind hem. tiny bits of difference. You can, on the 1008, set your stitch length, so you just choose stitch A and make it as long as you can for the first part. Now I want to have, preferably this extra bit that I folded over, I want that to be stitched down, but I really do want to have a reasonable amount of fabric here on the edge. So I'm doing straight stitch and I'm trying to keep sort of along here. You'll notice I'm sewing with the large amount of my fabric on the left. Sewing machines are intended for you to have the seam on the right hand side, not the left. This little space is not big enough to have whole things in if you can avoid it. So try to always sew with the bulk of your fabric on the left. It doesn't matter if I'm not perfectly exact with this because it's going to be pulled out later. It is there to hold things in place while I'm doing the blind hem. We're now going to put the blind hem foot on, so pull the thing towards me and put the blind hem foot in position. On the 1008 machine, choose stitch E. That's the stretch blind hem stitch. And you can set your stitch length probably to about 3. That will still be enough stitches in the blind hem to keep everything nice and stable, but it means those stitches are a bit further apart and makes them less obvious on the front. So I need to make sure which stitch it's going to put down. It's putting down the little zigzags, see it's like this here. It's putting down the little zigzags on the right, and now it's going over all the way to the left. That is the stitch that I need to be able to work out. And when it's going all the way over there, I need to adjust this foot so that it's very slightly to the right of where that needle is going. Now take that out. When you are sewing a blind hem, you have the right side of the fabric down. But we're not doing this. What we're doing is folding that over so that we can see the inside edge of that hem. Try and make it an even amount. So what we're doing, we're putting the in there. We want this, the needle to just be catching the edge of this fold, and the lesser the amount it catches it by, the better the blind hem will look, the right side of the fabric. So what I'm doing, folding the fabric here, and now all I have to do is keep this folded edge right next to that flange. So it's stitching on the back of the hem, and then it comes over and does one stitch into this, which is the top fabric. I'll do a reasonable amount of it so that you can see just what we're aiming at. The bigger the bite it takes out of this folded edge, the more it will be visible on the right side of the fabric. If you're doing it with a thick fabric, then you've got more leeway to play with before it really starts showing up on the right side of the fabric. So this is the wrong side of the garment. So if it was a pair of pants, this would be the wrong side. The right side would be underneath, and I'm exposing the inside edge of the hem. can see here the stitching is mostly on this bit, which is the inside of the hem, and there's just a little tiny bit being picked up here. I actually managed towards the end to miss picking it up in a few places here, so that it won't be held there. But now if we turn this the right way over, remember that original line of stitching was me putting something down so that I could not have to worry about where things were going to move while I was doing the blind hem bit. And if we look here, there's a little red piece. That is the blind hem. Those little red bits. Now if they were in purple thread, which matched the fabric, it would be pretty hard to see them. The final thing I need to do is to unpick this, which is why I did it with stitch C, because stitch C is a really big one. So by doing it this way, this is really easy to pull out, and that's what I'll do now. Now I've just been along and I have used my quick unpick or stitch ripper and picked out about every third stitch in that row. When I go to the back, if I grab hold of the red thread now, I'll get hold of it in a moment, and as I pull that, that should just pull everything undone. There'll be some random threads. So now when we go to the right side, they're not easy to see, are they? Even though that is red thread, and if I pull on the back, you can see where the stitches are coming through. Now the final thing you need to do is to press it, and by pressing it, those stitches will meld into the fabric and they'll be even less visible. So if they were done with a purple thread that somewhat matched this fabric, what you would be seeing on the back is that, but that little red thread is just that little tiny bit in there. So that pretty much covers the Janome 1008 machine. If you want more information, I'm going to put this into a playlist with a couple of other videos that I think could come in handy for you. One would be the one I did on tension, and maybe the one on top 5 reasons your machine's not sewing. Check that playlist out, and I hope you have fun with your 1008. See you next time.